that verse or that word was basically unheard of. People were more interested in the Beatles and more interested in Elvis and more interested in going to Woodstock. But afterwards, subsequently, with the new culture and with the decline of communism as the next global threat, you find that this is basically viewed as something to be afraid of and something to be frightened of. But actually, if you look at the Quran, it's divorced of all the sinister manifestations that one might basically read about in mass media. I hope that answers the question. I know we are pressed for time, and I tend to get to stretch it a bit. Some say I've got verbal diarrhea, but I'll give this to Professor. I'll give the floor over to Professor to address us, and then I've just got a PowerPoint presentation that I've prepared for you with certain satirical images that you might enjoy. So I'll hand the floor over to Professor. I might also add that I saw his your schedule yesterday, which the Professor kind-heartedly gave to me, and I must say I'm quite impressed with what you people at Whitworth University do. It's not known in South Africa. I'm not so sure if any of the other major universities engage in such a comprehensive workshop as you guys do, and I think for that your professor deserves an applause.
Well, you should know this program has been put together over many years by a number of professors, and I have 3 colleagues here today. And you talk about verbal diarrhea, but one thing I don't think anyone would accuse you is of the other side of that, mental constipation. And I've always enjoyed being with Yusuf, who's an attorney and is one of the sharpest minds of anybody I've ever met, I think. I just want to make a few remarks about conversations between Muslims and Christians. And last time we were here, I referred to the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I sometimes look at the world and think of all the problems the world is in. And it's sort of like the world is that person who's laying there beside the road, bruised and wounded. You think about the poverty, the problems with the environment, HIV/AIDS, all the kinds of things the world is facing. And I sometimes worry that the world that is not Christian, the world that is not Muslim, looks at us as Christians and Muslims and thinks of us sort of like the priest and Levite who walk by. And we're too busy as Christians and Muslims sometimes debating and arguing and competing with each other instead of coming together when we can and addressing the serious, serious problems the world faces. Because after all, we all are children of Abraham. We all are people who worship the same God. We're people who share so many things. And I don't want to gloss over the differences because it's not fair to say that Muslims and Christians are exactly the same. They're not. We have differences, but we share many, many things. And I would hope that as we walk down the road and see people who are on the side of the road in need, that as Christians and Muslims, that we join together. As I was thinking about this, I thought about sort of another analogy using the parable of the Good Samaritans. And maybe in some ways we as Christians and Muslims are also the person who's wounded lying by the side of the road. We face some real problems that I think we need to work together and try to address. And there are 2 that I just want to mention that I think have deeply, deeply hurt both Christians and Muslims in our communities. And one is the issue of violence. And I think we have to be honest that there are many Christians who have misused violence, who see violence as a proper way to solve problems, and there are Muslims who've thought about that in the same way. And it seems to me both we as Christians and people who are Muslims need to go back to our scriptures and think together about how do we work together for peace instead of violence. Another problem I think we have that has wounded, troubled all of us is the kind of secularization that you see around the world. And We've had conversations with our host families probably about the power of television, the kind of things that come on TV, movies, the kind of things that undermine families, family values, and that certainly is a problem for Muslims and a problem for Christians. And I hope that together, those are some things that we can work on and ask, how do we together address those things and resolve those things? So those would be my brief thoughts. And,
I just want to read just which echoes something which Professor stated. There's an interesting book which I'd probably urge all of you to get. It's written by Professor Michel Chossudovsky from, he's the center of, he's a professor of economics at the University of Ottawa and director for the Center of Research on Globalization. And he's got an interesting book called The Globalization of Poverty and the New World Order. And in the introduction he states, humanity is undergoing in the post-Cold War era an economic and social crisis of unprecedented scale, leading to the rapid impoverishment of large sectors of world populations. National economies are collapsing and unemployment is rampant. Local level famines have erupted in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, parts of Latin America. This globalization of poverty, which has largely reversed the achievements of post-war decolonization, was initiated in the Third World, coinciding with the debt crisis of the early 1980s and the imposition of the IMF's deadly economic reforms. The New World Order feeds on human poverty and the destruction of the national environment. It generates social apartheid, encourages racism and ethnic strife, undermines the rights of women, and often precipitates countries into destructive confrontations between nationalities. And, I think it was read pretty fast, but essentially, the problems that you find in the world today are by and large as a result of these so-called major international instruments that are in place that are basically geared to cause devastation in parts of the Third World. Sometimes, as individuals, we need to embrace our common humanity and go beyond nationalism or nationhood and so on. And in the context of this presentation, I'll just illustrate certain key points that I think you'll probably agree to, obey. And you've got people sitting in front of a television screen. We as human beings are generally controlled by mass hypnosis. If you look around, it's so easy and so simple to basically train or coerce or influence a particular group of people to think according to a particular line, sometimes taking absolutist positions. A country and a people who were so cultured and who basically celebrated the works of Goethe and Beethoven were brainwashed and systematically programmed into thinking nothing about the incineration of 7 million Jewish people and gypsies and other individuals and the oppression of homosexuals and so on. Total destruction of society. That's because that the powers that be are so easily at manipulating the global mass consensus. If you look at something like sheep, if you look at the concept of a sheep and the principle of a sheepdog, the sheep individually is one of the most difficult animals to control and to pick. But in a flock, they're exceptionally easy to control. Because more often than not, you've got the sheepdog. The sheepdog controls the sheep. But we as human beings, by and large, we seem to out-sheep the sheep. Because we police each other. We seem to basically erect artificial barriers and artificial social constructs. And we bet anybody who has a different opinion or a dissent from the established norm or what is viewed as established view is basically ridiculed and insulted and eliminated from the kind of mainstream of society. There's an old Chinese proverb which says, don't be like the nail that stands out because it'll be the first one that gets hit through. And you basically look at human society and how it's evolved and how it's developed, you basically find that the thing that stands up is the first to basically get knocked down. We basically out-sheep the sheep and sometimes outmaneuver them in terms of how we control each other, how we police each other. He's right, he's a doctor, or he's a lawyer, he has to know, or he's a professor, with due respect to Professor Yoda. But we don't adopt, we don't embrace our whole, we don't embrace our individuality. We basically acquiescence to what the dominant status quo tells us. Now, this is something which is quite interesting because the analogy applies to what we have in society around us. And why I always show this particular slide, and particularly the picture that follows after this, is that it tells us a lot. The analogy has behind us. We sometimes see what we are told to see, but we don't see behind the thin veneer. In the 1950s, you found there was an experiment conducted when subliminal images were used in theaters. They announced a 58% increase in Coke sales. What they do, they'd have an advert, and they'd have a split second an image of Coke. And you'd go to the tea room, and you don't know what draws you, but somehow you are drawn to purchase that particular item. When they made the movie called The Exorcist, they found that people were leaving the theater and they started vomiting. But subliminally, the actual director had pigs grunting in the background when he was actually making the movie. They added that particular sound effect, and people couldn't see, couldn't identify what was affecting them. So subliminal images affect us unknowingly, affecting our decision-making, our train of thought and beliefs. What may appear as normal is in fact highly abnormal in nature. And this bodes well for what we see around us. How many of us, for example, accept what we see in the news, in the mass media? Government says this, or State Department says this, President Zuma says this, the Department of Health says this, and we just simply accept them. And more often than not, many of the real hardcore journalists will tell you